Hello, welcome to Lasers and More. I'm Sarah, and today we are going to learn how to design a notebook cover from start to finish. The notebook cover is going to have words that are welded together, but before we can do any design work, first we need to figure out the size of the notebook. So this is a Walmart notebook. It is a pen and gear journal. It's 200 pages. It's important to get a 200-page journal so you have enough thickness, because you will have to remove some pages because most laser material is thicker than these covers. This is roughly 1/16 inch. So this shows that it's 6.38 inches by 8 inches, but that's the finished size including the binding. And we need to measure the book itself to make sure that we are designing it so that it will fit. So start by getting the measurement on the cover, and that is just a hair over 6 inches. It's 6 1/16. So mark that down. And now let's get the height, and that is 8 1/32. Okay, now we need to move on to a much more refined device, and this is a caliper. Make sure it is zeroed out and measure your holes. And that is 0.196 wide. And this is the inside diameter measuring, and this is the outside. So if you want to measure the space between the holes, you pinch, and that is 0.306. And we'll just take a couple more measurements to make sure it's consistent. 0.305. 0.303, 0.301, 0.303. So if we use 0.303 to 0.306, we should be fine. This is a very small number. So if we use something like 0.305, that should work. Next, let's get a couple more internal widths. 0.199, 0.195, 0.197. So 0.196 is going to be just fine. Now let's get the height of each of the holes. 0.183, 0.197, 0.195. I think the 0.183 was a bad measurement on my part. Okay, so 0.196 high and 0.196 wide. So it's 0.196 high and 0.196 wide. And the last thing that we need is the measurement before the holes start at the top and the bottom. So 0.425 and 0.399. No, let's 0.405 and 0.415. So the last thing that we need to do is count each of the holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Those are all of the measurements. Now we can move over to the computer and start designing. Silhouette Studio and open a new file. The first thing that you're going to do is create a rectangle with rounded corners. Does not matter at all what size your rectangle is. Just draw it, click your pointer select tool, click the box that you just drew, and now refer back to your measurements that you took and adjust the width and height accordingly. I measured 6 1/16, so that is 6.0625, and it will round for you. And I measured 8 1/32, 8.03125. Again, it will round for you. And there you go. So let's zoom into the corner where we can adjust the roundness of the corner. Use the drag over a shape to zoom. Zoom way in there, and I want my corner to be close to 90 degrees, but not an actual sharp edge. That looks good to me. It looks uniform, not oblong. And it's just a very, very mildly rounded corner. The next thing that we're going to do is grab the square cornered rectangle tool and draw a square of whatever dimensions that you want. And my measurements were 0.196 by 0.196, so I am going to make that. And hit enter, and it changes the size for you. And the one thing that I forgot to measure on camera was the distance from the hole to the edge of the notebook. And I measured that off camera, and it is 0.19 on mine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle that is 0.19 wide, and I'm going to make it the same height as the top of the notebook, which is 0.405, and hit enter. So what that is going to let me do, and go over to the page setup, make sure that your smart snapping is on. I'm going to make it a little less sensitive. And bring the rectangle over and make it so that the blue lines show up. Now I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little bit better the blue lines showing up. So there's a blue line here and here. That means that it is aligned exactly in the right place. And now let's drag the hole over and make sure that it gets the blue lines at the top or the bottom and the side of the new rectangle. And it did. You now have your first hole. To create your next hole, we're going to use the replicate panel. And we're going to do a custom advanced replicate. We want 14 more, so a total of 15. 1 plus 14 is 15. And we are going to want each one below but we want it a custom position below. And we want a X offset. X is the left to right of 0, and Y is the top to bottom. And we want our Y offset to be 0.305, but it's going to be 0.305 plus the size of the hole. So 0.305 plus 0.196 is 0.501. So 0.501, and then hit replicate. And it replicates them down all the way to the bottom. And now we want to make sure that this one is the correct height from the bottom. So let's create one more box, and we'll make it the width of the notebook, which is 0.19, or the width of the edge of the notebook to the hole. And then it is going to be 0.415 for my notebook. 0.415 height. And I did something wrong. I don't know why it did that. 0.415, enter. Okay, there we go. It is the right size now. And we want it to line up. And it does. Yay, everything is magic. Math worked right for once. Okay, delete your little boxes that you made for the offset. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color of all of these boxes to something different. I want those to cut before I want the rest of the cover to cut, because they're smaller. And so once this entire box cuts out, if the board that you're cutting is even the slightest bit warped, these will not be in the right location. So if you cut these out first, a warped board is not going to move with these little tiny squares out, but it will with the whole rectangle out. So I'm going to group those together, and then I'm going to group them to the notebook. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more rectangle, and I want it to be the rough dimensions of the space between the holes and the edge. So I'm going to drag it over until I get the teal line. I'm going to drag it up until I get the teal line, down until I get the teal line, and over, and I'm not getting that teal line. I'm not sure why, but it looks like it's overlaid on the holes, so that's good enough. This does not need to be exactly perfect. It's just making it so that when we do our next part of the design, it is as close to centered as is reasonable. And let's change the color of that. And I'm going to make it a little bit bolder of a line so it shows up. Okay, now the next thing that we do is we get to be creative. So you want to have some words or some pictures to put in that place. And I'm going to do another with welded words. And I'm going to use what I just wrote here, which is believe in yourself first, then believe in others. Don't wait for others to believe in you. So I'm going to copy that, and I am going to get my text to show up over here, and then I'm going to change my window over here to the text style panel. While this is blinking, I'm going to hit Command V, which is paste, You can also do Control V if you are on a Windows PC. Now I'm going to go back over to my notebook and grab my green box and Command C for copy and paste it over here in this file. And this is going to be our reference size. Now you can see that this is maybe a little bit too wide of an aspect ratio for what's going to go in here. So double click in it until you have the teal bar on the right side and the green box highlighting everything. And I think this is going to work okay. I'm going to move in to the next line so that I have a little bit more of an even distribution of the words. Okay, and now I'm going to change the font. I want something a little less squared off. I want something that's a little bit more playful. I happen to like the font called Bimby, Bimbey. So select your entire area and change the font. And the font that I'm mentioning is free for personal use, but if you want to use it as something that you're going to be selling, then you need to buy it. I bought mine from creativefabrica.com, and I got it when it was part of a group of fonts, but this is what it looks like. You just search for Bimby and you can find it, or any other font that you want. And now that I moved it, I noticed that the word distribution is not exactly what I wanted it to be. So moving things around again, and that looks better. So the next thing that you're going to do is you are going to convert to path, and then you're going to ungroup everything. Now you want to group each line, and I'm going to use Command G to group each of the lines together. And keep doing that for every single line. Now I'm going to create an inset of the example box, and that is with the star, which is the offset panel. And I'm going to use the internal offset. And I want to have at least a 1/2 inch all the way around on the inside of this. And click in the gray area to see what that looks like. And that is at least the 1/2 inch that I want. And I can change the size of this box later depending on how these words fit in there. And I'm definitely going to have to change it, but we'll see how much in a few minutes. Hit apply. Now, let's grab our first row of text. I'm going to bring the box over closer to the text so I can zoom in and not lose the rows. We want this whole row to fit all the way from the left to the right and to connect above the box. So, with the up arrow, click until it goes above the box. Change your outline size to 0 so you can be sure that you are or are not above the box with every single letter. And then stretch so that you have covered all the way over the ends of the letters. Now, I want the B to be a little bit more defined, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ungroup now, and I'm going to select the B, and then I'm going to select the edit points, and I'm going to make a new point in the middle here, and I want it to go in like that. And I want it to be a little bit more curved, so I clicked the Convert Selected Node to Curves. Going to change the angle of the top of the B. And I'm going to pull that in a little bit more, so I have more than just a point of contact, but now I have a little bit of that B that is giving a little bit of a reveal of the square that it's going to be in. And I want to do something kind of similar with the N. And again, I'm going to curve that and adjust the curve. It just gives it a little bit more of a fun feel. Now make sure that all of your letters go over the edge. This one does not. So let's bring the top of the N up and over. There we go. Let's bring that part up and over. Let's adjust the E too. And this is the kind of finicky part. I mentioned in one of my Facebook group posts about this that it's time consuming. And this is why it's time consuming, because you need to make sure that you don't have anything that is not connected. Everything needs to be connected, or you're going to have your design fall apart, and that would be tragic. Okay, so believe in is now where it's going to work. Let's grab yourself first, and it's too big, and that's okay. Let's zoom back in. And let's take yourself first and make it so it just reaches over the line there. And just reaches over the line there. And then you want the text to overlap with the row above it. So you need to make sure that every single letter, the Y, the O, the U, every single letter has some overlap with one of the letters above it. So this L is barely overlapping, and that is not going to work for me. Same with the I here, it's not overlapping with anything. So for the I, the way I'm going to take care of that is I'm going to edit the points on this E and make the E a little bit bigger. And your eye is not really going to notice that so much when you're looking at the design. Your eye is going to see that everything kind of looks normal, and that's a good thing. I'm going to do the same thing with this E over here and just make it so that it has a larger overlapping area. Another thing I'm going to do to help anchor this L is I need to ungroup so that I can adjust individual letters. And I am going to edit the L, and I'm going to delete that point there because it's unnecessary, so that it's overlapping with the E here. So I'm going to bring the bottom of the E over. So it's got a couple connection points, so it won't be quite as loose. I'm going to do the same thing with the R, and I'm just going to drag it so it overlaps there. I'm going to do that and make it kind of a cute shaped R. And so I'm not going to talk about how I'm doing this the rest of the way. I'm going to speed it up and let you just kind of see it in action. But you get the idea that you want all of the letters to overlap in some way, shape, or form to the letters of the other rows and or each other. And you always want to overlap with the outside of the rectangle. Now this next row has a apostrophe. This next row has an apostrophe. So we need to make sure that that apostrophe gets connected somewhere. So we will work with the row just like that we had been before. Bring it so that it is overlapping with the other rows. And make sure the apostrophe is connected in some way, shape, or form, and it is. So that worked out really well. Not usually quite that lucky. Just making the final last adjustments. And if you can see here at the bottom of the screen, I am very close to what the bottom of the rectangle was. That's just a sheer coincidence and a very lucky coincidence. But it definitely does not always work out that way, and sometimes you end up with a lot different size of a rectangle and you just end up centering it top to bottom. So let's take that rectangle and shorten it up so that there's overlap on every single letter. And let's zoom out. Select your inner box and your outer box and make a compound path. Now select everything and click on Weld. So now you can take this picture and put in a fill, and let's use a contrasting color so that we can see the difference between the outline and the color. And now let's zoom in to each of the letters and make sure that there are good enough connections that nothing is floating by itself, because if something is floating, then it is not going to be connected once you take the image out of your Glowforge. So everything I'm seeing is connected so far, so that is perfect and exactly what we're looking for. So for example, and this is not floating because it's connected all the way down, but where you see here that there's green next to green, if it was green next to green all the way around, then that piece would not be connected and it would fall out. And it looks good to me. So I'm going to zoom out. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to go to Object and Release Compound Path. And I am going to delete the outside. And now I'm going to object make compound path. And I'm going to get rid of the fill because I don't need that anymore. It was just there to double check everything. And I'm going to change the color to something that's not on the other page. Now I'm going to copy that image and I'm going to paste it into this notebook page. And now I'm going to select both it and the green box by holding down Shift. And I am going to align them to the center of each other. You can either do that by selecting this and both the center left to right and the center up and down, or you can click the center button. And I personally like to have a little bit more height from the bottom of the notebook to the bottom of the design than I do from the top of the design to the top of the notebook. So I'm going to just scooch it up a little bit. Scooch is a technical term. And once I'm happy with how it looks aesthetically, and I am going to remove my green box. Now, if you are doing a front and a back to your design, then you need a back cover. And if you are doing it on a piece of wood with wood grain, you probably want the front and the back to have the same grain direction between the two. So what you need to do is you need to select your notebook cover and copy it and then paste it. And this is going in the same orientation as it currently is, but if you imagine that the binding is here and you're laying this out on a board, you want the binding of the back to be over here. So you're going to take the object and you're going to mirror it horizontally. Now that it is mirrored horizontally, you can move the two pieces close together. You don't want them right on top of each other because it's going to cause extra burning as it cuts that line twice. But if you have them just a little bit away from each other, you're going to preserve as much wood as possible. And I'm going to save that as a second design because I might just want the cover. I don't know. It's really up to you. You can save it as the same design or you can save it as something different. And again, make sure that you save it as the format SVG because that's what the Glowforge is going to be able to read. Hit OK. Then let's go over to the Glowforge app and go to your dashboard, create a new design from a file. Believe in yourself, front and back, upload. And here it is. Let me delete the green box. Now, all of the different colors that I had, this was blue, this was purple, this was red, come out as different steps. And that's exactly what we want. And we can either have the words cut first or we can have the binding cut first. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to have the words cut first. It's fine. You could drag that up and make the binding cut first. It's your choice, but always make sure that the notebook cover and back cover cut last because once those big rectangles are separated from the even most slightly warped board, it will ruin the rest of the design if it hasn't been cut first. So I'm going to go put some fresh material in here and I am going to get it started cutting. That you need to cut out a backer piece for the back side of the notebook cover. So it's all selected. I guess I have to select a material even though it's not cutting at that. And hit print. Now you're going to need to glue a backer piece to the back of your notebook cover. And here's what it looks like. It came out great. I'm using acrylic and the back is glossy. The glue will not adhere to glossy acrylic. So I'm going to take some 150 sandpaper and scuff it up. An alternate would have been if I had 3M sheets to cut with the 3M sheet already adhered to this part of the design, but I don't have any because it's on back order everywhere that's under $200 for a roll. So I'm just gonna scratch until it's not shiny anymore. So my next step is going to be adhering two-sided tape to the big areas of the letters. I'm gonna just kind of disperse it. And then I am going to spray glue. I blew some compressed air on this to get rid of any dust. And now I'm going to use my tape. I got this off of Amazon. It has 2 different sizes of tape. I'm gonna start with the thicker one. And that should actually be enough to give it a good hold and a good backing. But I think I am going to put some thinner stuff, just a couple pieces on that line there. Now we have a masked board. See? This is the design, it's masked. I am using this material. It seems to work kind of on everything. And you need to spray just about a finger height away from the material. My size finger, most people's fingers are longer, so maybe like 3/4 of a finger. And I always do a couple quick sprays to make sure I've got it down again. And then peel the masking off. Unfortunately, the masking does not pull the backer of the double-sided tape off, but that's okay. Curing for that spray will happen while you're removing all of this backing. Now put your backer on, make sure that the holes are lined up. Okay. And I am just gonna relieve these edges because acrylic is a little bit sharp. And I'm going to relieve the edges on the back side too. I'm going to go blow this off with compressed air. There it is. Now it's time to assemble it. So the very last thing that you need to do is you need to remove the old cover from the notebook and replace it with your new cover and backer. So I use pliers. You can also just use your hands, but I pull the binding up and away from the back of the binding. Take the back one off. Now take the cover off, and then I remove 30 sheets. 30 sheets. And then put the cover on. And put the backer on so that the sides match. So if this was wood grain, the wood grain should match. Now close these up, and I use my fingers for it because I haven't found a good way of getting the pliers back in there. Okay, swing the back around, make sure it closes nicely. And it does. Remember, this is not going to close all the way flat because of these in there, and that's okay. But just make sure that you can actually open to different pages. If you have too many pages in there, you won't be able to. So you have a completed notebook. Congratulations. Thanks again. This is Sarah with Lasers and More. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe. I will have more videos coming out in the near future. Have a good one.